Hello, everyone. Greg Otto, Editor-in-Chief of Cyberscoop here, and I'm talking with Adam Hickey, the Deputy Assistant Attorney General of the Department of Justice's National Security Division. Adam, thank you for participating in the Fal.Con for Public Sector Virtual Cybersecurity Conference.
Greg, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, 2020 election year, and election security is obviously top of mind in DC and across the country. And election security really blends technical and human challenges together like no other area. So where do you think efforts should be concentrated when it comes to the security of elections?
So particularly in this area, I would say the word to watch is resilience. Election officials know that contingencies and surprises are inevitable, whether we're talking about power outages, hurricanes, computer issues, or in the current year, a pandemic. So what's going to matter is being prepared for questions about accuracy and authenticity of votes. And that means being ready for a disruption and then having a plan in place, having backup files, having ways of recourse if something surprising happens. So in other words, you just can't play defense. You have to focus on how to make the case to people that you were prepared for something. And yeah, there was a hiccup, but here's how you know that a vote counted or a vote cast was a vote counted. And the other point to make now, I think, in the context of the pandemic is to plan for change. So obviously, as states account for reluctance to vote in person or social distancing, maybe they shift to mail-in ballots. That's going to change resources. It's going to change threat vectors a bit. It's going to make maybe certain systems more attractive to adversaries than others. So obviously, the more time you can put in advance to thinking through and gaming out how that change will affect things, the better.
So let's talk about that change with respect to the pandemic, because it really has changed every aspect of our world. So how do you think it has changed cybersecurity already?
I guess two ways of looking at it. One is short term and one is long term. In the short term, I think you've got a huge percentage of the world's population is focused on one event and is emotionally keyed up about it in many cases, right? And that's the pandemic. So as a way of getting people's attention and luring them into clicking on something, you've got this huge event that is ripe for that. And so an email about your severance package or an all hands meeting to discuss phase 2 of reopening, that has more traction with people, even savvy people, than maybe it would have if we were all operating as we were in January and earlier. So I think it's changed cybersecurity in the sense that it's made us all maybe a little bit less smart than we were before and made it harder for network defenders for that reason. In the long run, it just seems like it's accelerated the trend towards telework, bring your own devices, and other changes in the topography of networks that make it harder to defend, right? So instead of the network being principally this thing that is in the same building that you were in, now you've got to worry about a lot more devices with which may or may not have been patched, with a user that may not be savvy about how their home environment might open up the company's network to different threats.
So one of the attacks that has really proliferated during the pandemic, ransomware attacks. I mean, it was proliferating before the pandemic, and I feel like the pandemic has only exacerbated it. So how can states, cities, governments, and other enterprises break free of ransomware at a time when they can't afford to be crippled by an attack?
Absolutely. I mean, the answer, I think, is to be ready for it. The key is backups that allow you to revert to a relatively recent snapshot of your network with relatively current data, backups that can't be corrupted by the ransomware because they are not, consistently or constantly connected to the network where ransomware might be launched. And then second to that, obviously other security measures like network segmentation are going to matter, right? If you're a city or a county government, maybe the ransomware gets into one system or affects one component of your operations, but you don't want to be in a situation where the entire county government is on one network and ransomware that affects one piece is going to spread quickly through all of it. And then obviously it's really important your employees understand the threat of ransomware and understand why it's that much more important not to click on emails that may be even the slightest bit suspicious.
So finally, you talked about remote telework there, and with the pandemic, there has been just this radical shift to working from home, and I would imagine that enterprises are also having a radical shift in their security initiatives. So in your opinion, what is the best way to get buy-in from a workforce when it comes to security initiatives?
So this is drawn a little bit from my own personal experience.
Okay.
I would say teach people why a rule matters. People are more likely to follow a rule if they understand why the rule exists and why it's significant. And so when I was a law firm associate more years ago than I'd probably like to admit, and I was told, no, you can't, just download software to play music here. I didn't understand the why. I didn't understand why a network would be locked down and allow only certain programs to run. And I was annoyed. They didn't trust me. I'm like, I'm not going to download malware. I'm not stupid. I just want to play music. And I might even have tried to circumvent whatever measures were in place to prevent me from doing that. And that's because I didn't understand why the rule existed and what my innocent activity might have opened the company up to. And so I think particularly if your workforce might think they're smarter than IT, which would never happen at a law firm, but might well happen in other environments, I think it's important to do more than just teach the do's and don'ts. It's important, a little bit of cybersecurity training in terms of how computers communicate on the over the internet and why they are vulnerable will go a long way to teaching people why it's important they follow the particular protocol that you've put in place.
Great. Adam, really appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Take care.